Richard III, the last Plantagenet king, died at Bosworth, but in 2013, a new battle began. One that will take the country's top judges to decide his final fate.
The university's application and licence from the Ministry of Justice permitted exhumation and makes it clear that, if Richard is found, then reinterment would be in Leicester Cathedral.
They treat it as finders keepers. We've got him, we're keeping him, and that's that. It's all signed and sealed, so get lost.
This is not a fight over an object. It's about laying to rest a human being in the most appropriate place.
As Mayor of Leicester, Richard's remains will leave Leicester over my dead body.
In 2012, an archaeological dig turned into one of the most extraordinary discoveries in recent history. This is the exact moment archaeologists started to unearth the king in a car park.
Yep, that's a skeleton. There's his other leg.
Basically, it is a DNA match.
Then, a year ago this week, came the news that everyone was waiting for.
The individual exhumed at Greyfriars in September 2012 is indeed Richard III, the last Plantagenet King of England.
At the university, home to the expert team behind the dig, prospective students flocked to open days, archaeologists were overwhelmed by interest, and Leicester was well and truly in the global media spotlight.
Canada, South Africa, the Philippines, Thailand, Kuwait.
For Leicester, things couldn't have been going better, until out of nowhere a group calling themselves the Plantagenet Alliance complained. And next month, in a judicial review at the High Court, they're challenging the way the licence for the dig was granted.
Are you a troublemaker?
No, I'm quite passive, I think. Generally, I'm not a troublemaker. I'm just trying to right a wrong.
So, where did it all go wrong? I've come to the University of Leicester to meet the man who project managed the Richard III dig and whose name is on the licence that started this whole thing off, and who since January is now an OBE.
Your words say a research excavation's underway to investigate the remains of Leicester's Franciscan friary and also potentially locate the burial place of Richard III, whose remains were interred here in 1485. So at this stage, within the application, you're making it clear to the Ministry of Justice it could be his remains that we find, but we're not sure.
Yes, absolutely. Because ultimately, a project like this, you can't just sort of dive in the hope that you can find a burial straight away.
But at no stage did the Ministry of Justice come back to you and say, hold on a minute, you're talking about Richard III here, we've got to do this differently.
No, no, not at all.
Before every dig where human remains are likely to be found, archaeologists have to apply to the Ministry of Justice for a licence to exhume any that might be unearthed along the way.
So if you lift it and I hold on to this.
I do feel quite unhappy that people think that the university did something incorrectly, because we've followed normal practice on the exhumation of many, many burials over the years. For example, at the High Cross Leicester development, we excavated over 1,300 burials and followed due process. Of course, at the time we applied, we didn't know whether we were actually going to find Richard III or not.
Under the terms of the current licence, the university are still the custodians of the King's remains. It's a big responsibility, with 24-hour security at a secret location on campus.
There's lots of research in the university that needs to be done in high security areas for various reasons. And of course, in the interest of making sure that the bones are safe and secure, we have kept him in this facility because it's a particularly safe one.
Okay. So no one really knows that this is where he is?
Nobody knows that this is where he is. No, there's only two of us who have access to it.
And is this the room?
And this is the room. Because there are people who feel so strongly about it, what we don't want is to risk somebody taking action on those emotional feelings or souvenir hunting or whatever. It's our duty to make sure that they are safely kept until the reinterment.
Archaeologists at the University of Leicester believe it's best practice to rebury remains as close to where they were found as possible. But not everyone agrees.
So, who are the Plantagenet Alliance? What exactly do they want? Well, I've come to York to try to find out.
York, historic city and seen as Leicester's biggest rival to rebury the king. It's had a Richard III museum since the 1990s, and it's here that I've arranged to meet a Yorkist on a mission.
So what are we looking at here?
This is the Rowe family tree. This is my father's family tree. Goes back to about 1645.
What descendant are you?
There'll be 19 generations, so I'm actually the 16th great niece of Richard III.
As 16th great niece, Vanessa Rowe believes she and other relatives should have been consulted when it became clear the remains were the king's.
Once somebody becomes named, it doesn't matter how old they are or whatever, but if they do have descendants, of course there should be some consultation in their final resting place. If Leicester was that bothered about him, they were dug him up years ago. They knew where he was. They had a very good idea where he was.
Back in Leicester, a stone's throw from the dig site, more digging. Building work to transform the grounds around the cathedral is well underway, while inside, the plans for a tomb have been on hold since November.
The pulpit now works really well because when you're preaching to the majority of the building.
The group that has the final say on changes in England's cathedrals had its first full look round a few days ago. They'll make their decision after the judicial review hearing next month. Today, a cathedral website about Leicester's links to Richard and why his remains should stay here went live.
Richard's story is completely embedded in Leicester's story. Whatever the court decides, that does not change. He will be remembered here. His remains are in the soil of Leicester. And we look forward to his bones also being back in the soil of Leicester. It matters hugely to us all and to the people around us. And I actually think it matters to the people of England that we do the right thing, and that means he needs to be buried here.
With delays caused by the judicial review, a spring reburial has already been abandoned. Now there are real concerns it might not happen this year.
Taking this to the court at all seems to me to be not the best way to deal with the remains of a human being. I know it happens all the time, but I think everyone regrets that that's where we've got to with this.
This is going to be the area over here where the visitors will come in.
For Leicester's mayor, there have been frustrations too, but City Council plans for a Richard III museum to open this summer are going ahead, whatever happens with the judicial review. Reburial in the city could bring in millions of pounds from tourism.
What I want to do is to tell the story of Richard, tell the story of Bosworth and how he met his end, relate that to the story of Leicester.
Ahead of the High Court hearing next month, Sir Peter is enthusiastic yet cautious. There's a lot riding on this.
In reality, though, if the judges decide that there should have been consultation, there is a real risk that Richard III's remains could go somewhere else. Leicester could lose them.
It is in Leicester that the preparations are being made. It is in Leicester that the licence says he should be buried. The people who drafted the licence had prepared for that eventuality and had prepared in that eventuality for the reinterment to take place in the cathedral that is immediately behind us here and whose bells we can hear in the background as I speak. We're that close to the cathedral.
The judicial review will be heard in London on March the 13th. Only then will we know what's next for Richard III.
I suppose one of the great ironies is he's one of the most controversial kings in English history and remains so because of the judicial review.
It really is limbo, and I think that's an unsatisfactory situation, which I'm sure everybody wants resolved quickly, whether one wants him to be buried in Leicester or elsewhere.